So let's talk about the next topic, which is static budget report. Okay, so we are now we were discussing um, the budgetary control, and so now then we talked about the reports that make it possible to control the firm, right? And now within that context we are talking about static budget report. Okay, so basically the static budget report is a projection of budget data at one level of activity, and that's exactly what you did in the last chapter. You just created a budget, and you thought that your sales is going to be this number for first quarter, this number for second quarter, third quarter. So for every time there's a fixed number that you picked, and for the future year, and you get your total annual sales budget number, right? And that was static, like you just talked about. This idea was one activity level, and and then there are dollar figures. The same for the production. You had one set of numbers for your production budget. Okay, and that was about it. So when you have a report, so remember, report is in the context of control. Okay, so and report goes to the sales manager and to the senior managers, and production, for example, static budget report for production will again go to the senior managers and to the production manager, because now we are trying to see if is there anything wrong in our plan, like is the managers delivering, right? Is the work being done now as we planned? So here in this example, for first and second quarter of 2014, you can see that the sales budget was $180,000. So we're not even talking about the activity, how many units were sold here. What we are just looking at this number, that there's $180,000 of sales that should have been done for the first quarter according to the budget. When we look at the actual results in that first quarter, it was $179,000. So now when you look at this number, when senior managers and the sales manager is looking at it, and they're looking at this and saying, hey, is this a good news or a bad news? Definitely this is a bad news, because this company planned the sales to be 180 while the actual results is 179. So that is a bad report, bad result, or unfavorable result. Look at the second quarter. Your budget is $210,000 while your actual is $199,500. That again shows that you have a lower actual compared to the budgeted number, and you that difference is $10,500. And for the total annual year, it's called year to date, like, including first quarter, second quarter. If you sum up each row, you are again, if you sum 1,000 plus 10,500, it's 11,500. So it's an unfavorable result of 11,500, because your first two quarter should be budget was 390,000, and while in actual results are 378,500. So the point is, this is a report, right? A very simplistic report, and the senior managers and the managers are looking at it. So the information that you're getting is just the final number, no information about the units that were sold, no information about price here. You're not getting any detail about the activity here. Okay, so it's and that's the problem with the static budget report. So I'm gonna talk more about that. So again, this is similar information. So I'm gonna move on to. So again, we talked about it. Your year to date, year to date difference, which is unfavorable, is 11,500 because your sales are actual sales are lower compared to your budget sales. Okay, so that means the plans were either too optimistic or whatever, but we are not in reality we are not doing as we planned, right? That's the result. And so let's do this question. A static budget is useful in controlling costs when cost behavior is mixed, fixed, variable, and linear. The thing is, this static budget that we just looked at, okay, is good when we live in a world of fixed costs. When 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 the manager cannot do anything during the budget time. Um, so I'm going to come back to this. This is a little more tricky. So when the world is fixed, so if you planned your fixed costs to be this much for the year, and in reality your fixed costs are higher, there's something unfavorable. Like you can smell that you plan things um to be this, but if your costs are higher in reality, you just couldn't do anything. It's just a bad outcome. So it's a very simplistic way to look at it. But as you will see in the future slide, it will become obvious. This static budget, which is only good for fixed costs, that's why this answer is fixed costs, which works when world is fixed. We are assuming here that the manager does not have power to change things here. Fixed means fixed. So fixed budget compared with fixed actual, and you come with the result. So in that case, static budget report is good. But that's not true in reality. In reality, we have a flexible world. And I'm going to show you now. I'm going to demonstrate to you. So flexible budgets are those budgets that are prepared at different level of activity. So here we are assuming that the budget can be prepared not only at one projected level of sales or production, but also at a series of different levels of sales or production. The thing is, this is good for budgetary control. If you prepare your budget at different levels of activity, this makes a big difference. I'm going to demonstrate that in the example. So here's the example. Barton Robotics static budget based on a production volume of 10,000 units of robotics. So Barton Robotics says, let's budget your future overhead costs. Okay, and this is what you're seeing. So the budgeted production in units, 10,000, and based on that, your overheads are indirect material, right? And that's 250,000. Indirect labor is 260,000. Utilities is 190,000. Depreciation, property taxes, and supervision is the next three. Okay. So, but there's an underlying thing that these first three are kind of variable costs, right? Utilities we have talked about is mixed costs. Indirect labor, indirect material. With more production, this cost increases, right? Because this is variable. So depreciation, property taxes, and supervision are fixed costs. They don't change. You produce 10,000 or 12,000. So when we were making budget, this is what we made. Budgeted production at 10,000 units. This is the final number for the sum of all these costs. We know underlying that these are variable costs. They go higher with more production and they go lower with less production, but fixed costs remain fixed. So with this story, let's move on to the next slide. So now comes the actual real show, right? When now you are in the budgeted year, when you're now looking at the actual results. So in the actual results, you produce 12,000 units. when you produce 12,000 units, your budget was based on 10,000 units. When you're going to compare your first three variable costs, they're all unfavorable. And they're all unfavorable, while depreciation, property taxes, and supervision is pretty same. That's why the difference is zero here. And so if you're a manager of this, you may be thinking, hey, in reality, I did a lot more work because I produced 12,000 units. All my, these differences are between actual and budget is unfavorable. Isn't that, isn't there something wrong here? I worked even harder while I'm just getting bad news. So this is exactly the problem. It creates meaningless and bad incentives for the manager. So what you need to do is we need to create another budget which is based on 12,000 units to really compare whether the manager has done a good job or not. So let's produce. So this is just telling you that all your unfavorable, you got an unfavorable variance, and beside that, this report is meaningless. No good, right? So static budget, no good. Let's make a flexible budget. So how are we gonna do that? This is a critical thing. This is a learning point where you need to learn how you're gonna do that. So the first three, remember, costs have a variable sense in it. Variable, it's variable cost, right? So you take that variable, and remember the number of production units was 10,000. So if you divide by 10,000 each of these costs by 10,000 on a per unit basis, it's going to be 25, 26, and 19, right? And so if that's the variable cost, then all you need to do to get a new budget at 12,000 units, you're going to multiply that 25 by 12,000 to get this new variable, new budgeted costs for indirect material, for indirect labor and utilities. Just multiply by 12,000, whatever this per unit basis number is. So once you do that, hey, you got a new budget for 12,000 units, and your numbers are now for the first three, which are variable, 300,000, 310, 12,000, 228,000, and so when you compare, now you're comparing apple to apple, right? You got 12,000 units in budget, you got 12,000 units in actual. You look at their differences, and you find that the manager, it's all favorable. Your budget was a much a higher number, while in reality it's lower. And the reason, and why is the reason? Because you have produced at a lower cost. You've done a better job, and maybe reducing wastage, maybe. So you're favorable, and so this is great news this is a good news for the manager of production, right? Because you're producing your actual total dollar figure. You're good at sort of controlling the costs of your department, and you're a good manager. So that's the idea of flexible budget. You compare apple with apple. You gotta bring your activity level at the same level. If you don't do that, you're comparing irrelevant report. In fact, you're going to punish your managers. Not punish, you're going to create a sense of this bad feeling that maybe the manager has not done a good job. So while the manager has been working very hard. So static budgets are not good when the activity level are different, when there are variable costs involved. Because if there are variable costs, and if the actual production is much higher, of course your variable costs will be higher, just like we saw in the previous case. So we saw this unfavorable in the variable, because your actual production was higher, and variable cost increases by the number of units you produce. So no surprise, this was unfavorable, and flexible budget is a way to fix this issue. Okay, and this was the main critical idea of this chapter. Now we'll look at some cases, and so that will cover this chapter. Thank you.